eriwo ya, eriwo ya, eriwo ya. Ayapo, ayapo, ayaje, ayamu. Omeriwo simpe. Ìbà Olódùmarè, ọba àti rere kí ayé, ìbà tí òjò, ìbà tí òrùn, ìbà lé ogé èfi kò yé rí, ìbà Ọ̀rúnmìlà lè pín, ìbà Ọ̀rúnmìlà ẹ̀dì kò tún, ìbà Ọ̀rúnmìlà ẹ̀dì kò sí, ìbà àkọ́dá, ìbà àṣẹ́dá, ìbà ọba àrìṣà nífẹ̀ẹ́, ìbà alájẹlú nífẹ̀ẹ́, ìbà ọbalùrin nífẹ̀ẹ́, ìbà olóyè fọ̀ṣù ìbódìmí ìlú ní àbíbà, ìbà ifá àgbélá, ìbà akérèdọ́lù, ìbà arabalótú ife, ìbà ìyàwó ojú oyè, ìbà gúngún, ìbà bàbá, ìbà yèyé, ìbà olófin ìbúfin ìlíre, ìbà pópó àwò, ìbà ojúpọ̀nà, ìbà ọmọ dúrúwà. Ọ̀rúnmìlà dákúndábò wẹ́lẹ́ wẹ́lẹ́ wẹ́lẹ́, Ọ̀rúnmìlà dákúndábò wẹ́lẹ́ wẹ́lẹ́ wẹ́lẹ́, Ọ̀rúnmìlà dákúndábò wẹ́lẹ́ wẹ́lẹ́ wẹ́lẹ́, Ọ̀rúnmìlà dákúndábò wẹ́lẹ́ wẹ́lẹ́ wẹ́lẹ́. Lọ́tún lósì àríra gúúsù. Àpọ́n bí àkọ́, àkọ́ bí àkọ́, àpọ̀npọ̀npọ̀npọ̀n, àkọ́kọ́ wálé, kọ̀kọ́kọ́, àníkọ́kọ́lọ́bà àkọ́ta, àpàtọ̀ fílé, rèsílé, gbẹ̀gbẹ̀ nílẹ̀ nínú ọ̀pẹ́ àkọ́. Fúnlẹ̀ o, kó wá pọ̀tọ̀, fún ṣẹ́ pẹ́lẹ́pẹ́lẹ́, kó wá pọ̀tọ̀, fún ṣẹ́ pẹ́lẹ́pẹ́lẹ́, kó wá pọ̀tọ̀, fún ṣẹ́ lè mí dandan síkùdà yégèrè yégèrè sípà, fún mi àjà ìgbóyin, ọmọ ẹ̀nà kan bẹ̀rẹ̀ owó jẹun. Ìsìnkú àti ọmọ bèbè, ìsìnkú ògún lọ́kà lẹ́sìn ìjọ lẹ́kìlì títí pẹ́ẹ́nì kó rere jẹ́ òun ọmọ ọba Ọ̀rúnmìlà ṣòwò kí ọmọ rere àjẹ́ ọjọ́ yìí bá ní. Pẹ́ẹ́nà aya àkìbà Ọ̀rúnmìlà ṣòwò kí ọmọ rere aya yìí bá ní. Pẹ́ẹ́nà ọmọ àkìbà Ọ̀rúnmìlà ṣòwò kí ọmọ rere ọmọ ní bá ní. Pẹ́ẹ́nà ilé àkìbà Ọ̀rúnmìlà ṣòwò kí ọmọ rere ilé ní bá ní. Pẹ́ẹ́nà ẹ̀sìn àkìbà Ọ̀rúnmìlà ṣòwò kí ọmọ rere ẹ̀sìn ńlá o. Máa kún ṣá o, ẹ̀sìn ńlá o. Máa kún ṣá o. Èjì ògbè fún mi fá. Ẹ̀sìn ńlá o. Máa kún ṣá o. Àṣẹlẹ̀ wáyé pẹ̀lẹ́ o. Akíhànsó, akíhànkùn. Òṣè tèrè òtú lòbí lòdè kẹtù. Àjànláwẹ̀ ni wọ́n pobí lòdè ìláwẹ̀. Wọ́n ní kí wọ́n ọmọ tí wá. Wọ́n ní kí òtí òfin bo. Wọ́n ní kí wọ́n ọmẹ́mú wá. Wọ́n ní ẹ̀mú náà ní òṣè o. Wọ́n ní kí wọ́n omi tútù wá. Wọ́n ní ìgbà yìí lẹ́nu mi tó lófin. Ìgbà mi lẹ́nu mi tó ire o. Dífá fún kòlógbò. Dífá fún kòlógbò. Tí yóò ìgbìngbìn rèé. Ẹbùnrin ní kò wá ṣe ọ̀bẹ̀pọ̀ orúkọ. Òní kòlógbò. Òní kòlógbò. Tẹ̀lú re kòlógbò. Kí ló fi. kí lo fi tọ̀mọ́, kí lo fi tàjẹ́, kí o fi tàyà, kí o fi tọ̀mọ́, kí o fi tèrè pọ́pọ́, kí lo mú táìkú pẹ̀lú re ẹnu re kòlóbò re o àṣẹ wà lẹ́pẹ̀lẹ́ o pẹ́pẹ́lẹ́ o ọ̀pàrọ̀pọ̀ tí ò bó lè tuntun kó dà nídìí ẹ̀dífà fún ẹlẹ́sùn pẹ̀mpẹ̀ mọ́ṣú ẹ̀dà nífẹ̀ẹ́ kọ́kọ́ ẹ̀kọ́ dùnà káwọ́ bá ní lásùkà àṣẹ gbogbo ṣé mi dàrẹ́wẹ́ ẹ̀dífà fún ẹ̀ṣù ẹ̀dà tí mo sọ láàrú ẹ̀ṣù ẹ̀dà nù tó ń lóde àṣẹ wà lẹ́pẹ́ adáwọ̀ kòrókùn ifá ti má wáyé lé ní o àwáyé pẹ́ ẹ̀ láyé o wá àlẹ́ o àti ìwà ìkẹ̀dẹ́ pèpèpèpèpèpèpèpà àbòyè àbọ̀ ṣíṣe o àpò àtọwọ́ sórí gòrò fún lóòtún lòsí àríra oṣù pẹ̀lẹ́ 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 pẹ̀lẹ́. Today, specifically come forward. May be fruitful and successful without question, without misdirection, giving insight, hindsight, foresight, clear sight this day. And they can impede or block the course of this pathway. This pathway consistently. TTSC. I fulfill evidence. Me for TTSC. In this pathway, that things will be flourishing, fruitful in all angles and all dimensions. Open this pathway in harmony, sinking, all pathways, guiding the pathway, lining my pathway with righteousness, with success, with wisdom, with clarity. TTSC, Obiku, Oseku. Irosun, Okaran. Otaru. And Oyinkan. Elaye pa. Ifá tí mi wáyé dé pé àdàmí wáyé lẹ alẹ́ wo kòròkò. Ifá tí mi wáyé dùn. Ẹ bàbá ẹ jẹjẹ ilẹ̀. So today, Odu, for today, the things that bring forth all creation and success. The Odu that came up today, specifically, is Irosun, Okaran, Otaru, and Oyinkan. These are Odus that came up for today. And so these Odus specifically were coming up this day. So TTSC is meaning just like an inquiry for the day. But within this Odu, we have many different things that come up for this day. So here, Irosun, we're talking about balance between the heaven and the earth. Have balance between these aspects and angles of what we seek to accomplish in our life. The blessings of our life, awaken this pathway in our life, right? Between Orun or heaven, Iliaye, the earth. Speaking of these things that those that come in, that understand, that are seeing, that are uplifting, that are guiding, that are seeing, that are awakening this day, and righteousness and success this day. Nothing can impede or block the course of this pathway in any way, shape, form, angle, or dimension. Open this pathway in unison this day, right? We're talking about all the things that are in sync and harmony. There's nothing that is um, out of sync. When we look at this Irosun, it's talking about how uh, she saw the child. And when she saw the child, that child was, because she was very bright skinned, very light skinned. And so when she saw the child, she had everything. She had money. She had everything that she needed. But this child was also someone that had issues. Right? Though she herself had issues because people talked about it and talked about it like a dog, like she was worth nothing. People gave her nothing. That people looked at her like she was just nothing at all because she has everything she needs. And why doesn't she have a child? And so she had met this person called Arimo Olodumare. When Arimo Olodumare came forth, Arimo Olodumare brought forth wisdom, clarity, abundance, prosperity throughout the day, right? And so when, because Arimo Olodumare is a very powerful spiritual person, or Babalawo, and said that in this Odu, that it was not meant to marry the opposite of itself. So it wasn't meant to marry a white person. It was only meant to marry a very dark-skinned person or a white person. That's what this, in general, is Odu speaking of. Because it says, do not, in this instance, do not marry a white person because it is nothing to do with racial. It's talking about that it was nothing being be arguing and fighting. Because arguing and fighting, things will be in disarray. Things will be thrown out of sorts. And so this, in general, when it talks about these things in Irosun, it talks about how when she met up with Arimo Olodumare, that this is when she would be prosperous and successful, like that internal alchemy, that a higher spiritual self, that she would have 5 children, that things would be fruitful in her life, successful in her life, right? And then we go to Okaran. Okaran is the Odu of, so here we talk about Irosun, balancing between heaven and earth, through the physical and the spiritual, right? And this one, for Okaran, is the Odu of Oya. And so it's talking about unwaveringly focus, be centered, be rooted, be righteous, be successful in your life, be abundant, be in sync in line with the truth and divine will of Olodumare, right? And, deep prayer, that you are the balancing, that bringing forth harmony, be the peacemaker. Don't always seek to relate or connect to things that are out of sync for self, right? Always making sure that these things are at harmony, not only with one aspect of our life, but all aspects of our life. That no matter what issues that are there, that there will be abundance, there will be success. But it's just going to take time that you have to endure. And that you have to be able to be flexible, be able to maneuver in all angles and all dimensions. Because Oya is a very powerful warrior, but even within this thing, she here represents water, just like Irosun represents earth. Here, Okaran represents water, the Niger River. So he's always been able to maneuver or be the peacemaker, always speaking the truth, but not and allowing, you have to be very strategic in your moves and how you move and the things that you seek to accomplish in life, right? Then here it talks about how in Otaru, to hold that baby tight so that he does not slip and fall, right? The things that are prosperous. So, but this one is Otaru is fire. So this fire is because it says, there's multiple angles of somebody trying to manipulate some things, right? And you have to be careful because there's multiple dimensions, multiple things that come into play. When these things come into play, that you have to be very careful not to get caught up in the manipulation, because it's not the person that's right in front of you; it's the one that is manipulating the situation, manipulating as you in this case. So that's why it says don't argue, don't fight, because it won't just be a fight; it'll be a bloody fight. These things will be out of turn, and things will be like all over and crazy. But it's not the person that you see in front of your face; it's the person that you don't see, right? And so this is a male. This is a husband. So Otaru is the husband of Oyinkan. So Oyinkan is since the wife is blocking in the husband, this is a no answer. It's a negative answer, or closed doors. We say in Abigba, Obiku Oseku. Obiku is open door, Oseku is closed door. So this is a closed door because the wife is blocking in the husband. And so there's going to be disharmony within that household. So they have to be very clear in the things that they seek to accomplish, right? And balance that goes on in the life. Because of this, these things are always in conflict. But so to make things blessed and fruitful, that Egbe has to be appeased, right? And then also, Oyinkan is saying that there is a so Oyinkan is the has the wisdom of the Iami, but is not a Iami themselves. That they have not been indoctrinated into the Iami because they have not been indoctrinated or accepted into that society. That they're hunted and that they are taken apart or misguided. But they have all the knowledge of that society. Because they have the knowledge of that society, those of that society are hunting them because they're not supposed to know that information. So that's what is coming into play because that is going. And then within Otaru, since it's blocking it in, there's nothing but mis chaos. So things are going out of turn, out of sync. So coming from here, the bottom, and so go from here to here. So now that's from right to left. And so from left to right, automatically you had two things. So that's 4, and this is 8. So here, going from left to right, so this is the first part. And the second part, so that's why also it talks about harmony, because making sure that you connect to Egbe, your astromates, so that these astromates are well taken care of, so that the things aren't thrown out of sync and out of sorts. So again, this is just an inquiry. It's not a full definition. It's merely inquiry. So if it was, we would go from left to right and from bottom to top, top to bottom. And then there were many other angles of Odu. And so that's where these things come into play. But that's the reading for today. The things that are inquiry, not a full definition, but merely a TTSC. That's important because, again, Abigba is different than all of the other forms of Ifa. It's very important to understand that because there's so much that is in this form or function of Ifa. So this is called Ifa Abigba. Ifa Abigba is a very old and ancient system. Like within this Odu, it speaks of so many things, right? Of how, there's disharmony in many things that are spoken or things that are misnomers that are not fully understood. So the origin of these kinds of all humanity, and that's what the really on this live, we're talking about the origin of all of humanity come from Africa, the continent of Africa, right? It is not coming from other places because you have all sources of all people from all different walks of life on the continent. You have people that are yellow. You have people that are Afin or albino or white, right? You have people that are very red toned. And you have people that are very dark skinned, all in West Africa, East Africa, North Africa. And you have places in Africa where this is a misnomer that it snows. There's places on the continent of Africa that snows. There's places on the continent of Africa that is desert. Then there are places on the continent of Africa that are physically lush and green and tropical, right? So you have all aspects there because it's a point of origin. When you have something from the point of origin, you have all of these things that make perfect harmony of all existence. So when the origin of all existence. And so that's how you know that is the point of all existence, because that's every phenotype that has ever been in existence, right? Has every aspect of all these pathways within Ifa, right? Within Ifa, definitely. Then also within the angles of other things that we call existence on this earth. So you have all skin tones, all phenotypes, all types of terrain, from people that are very, very tall. The tallest people in the world are in Africa. The shortest people in the world are in Africa. The slowest people in the world are in Africa. The fastest people in the world are in Africa. All aspects of all existence on this earth exist in Africa. Well, even when we look at that word of Africa, it in itself is, I want to do this because many people that have never traveled there won't be able to see it. Because if there is a point of origin of anywhere, then you would find those things, all of these aspects in that one place, right? Because you have all points. You can see that in West Africa. You can see that in East Africa. All these things that we're talking about, all these phenotypes, all throughout the continent of Africa, right? And so it is a misnomer to think that all of these places and spaces are that only white people exist outside of the continent. Not true, because Afin, we call in Yoruba Afin, and Afin is the albino. It's a mutation, and that's what it was. That was a mutation. And then as well as you have my skin tone, it's a very dark skin tone, to many different aspects and avenues all throughout the continent of Africa. In the Congo, in the center of what they call Africa today, because Africa today is not the word that was used. There were no borders. There were no places and spaces that people could go in and out of that they could see that were lines that distinguish country to country, right? Because then also, if you want to go from today's standards, there's over 54 countries on the continent of Africa, right? So it's not a country, it is a continent, right? And you have many different terrains, many different avenues, many different angles in that continent alone. That's how you know that it is a point of origin, because it has every single type of genome there in existence on the continent, right? I like how Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about that in detail in a very short amount of time. But he speaks about that very clearly, very focused. That's why I want to make this in general, because people make general statements. Oh, yellow people or people that look like Chinese or such and such are only in Asia. Nope, that's not true. Because you can go to the San people, right? And that is the point of origin of all Asian people, because you see the phenotype of the eyes and the nose and the skin tone, right? You can go and see the other small people that are also on the continent of Africa, that are very dark skinned, that are my skin tone, right? That are from all ranges and all angles. But if you start to look at these things and start to see how, even so, part of my ancestry comes from the Philippines, but the original people in the Philippines were the first people that came from the continent of Africa, right? They came from there and traveled there. So the only indigenous people on the earth are Africans, because they traveled to everywhere else, right? Because they were indigenous to that place. And it's very important to say that, because when you look at that, and so those Aita, when you go to the Philippines, that they are very dark skinned, right? And then you have different colors and variations there as well, right? Because those same people that populated Southeast Asia and other places, even in the Caucasus Mountains where they get the word Caucasian, there were people that were dark skinned. Even that when you talk about Sweden and the British Isles with the Cheddar Man, that was very dark skinned, because those are the first people that came there, right? Then you have all these other mutations that also came in and left on a consistent basis. So that's very important to understand, because those are the truth of reality. So it talks about those things, even in this order that we see today. It talks about those things and how these misnomers are being perpetuated all throughout the world. Why is that? Because there are things that happen, and so when somebody controls the narrative, they even tell the truth, because they said all of these things in their sciences, right? They said all these things in reality, because when something, if the point of origin started in South America, or the point of origin started in Asia, or the point of origin started in any of these other places, you could see all the phenotypes in that area, and you cannot, right? Because they came from one central location. So that doesn't downgrade or disrespect any other culture. What that does say, it says that there are variations of us and lineages of us, because there's different places that people stopped along the way, right? So those that are specifically from many different places and spaces, that their skin may be very white, because they themselves were albinos that left the continent, because you still see albinos on the continent today, right? Those same albinos, afin, and different versions of albinos. It's not just one type of albino. And so when you see them traveling out of Africa and going to the other places, you see the very dark-skinned people coming out of Africa and going to different places. And you see that phenotype all over the world, all over the globe. There's not one place that doesn't talk about the little people, or the, for lack of a better term, the Twa Mbuti. So people say pygmy, but the Twa Mbuti, the small people of this earth. So it's very important to understand that. So all religions, all traditions, all come from them. All of them. I don't care what tradition, I don't care what religion, I don't care what it is that you practice. It all comes from them. So that doesn't smash down on anybody's system and traditions and cultures of how things are established in certain areas, certain regions of the globe. That just says that those aspects and those patterns of those things are consistent across the globe. That you see these things everywhere you go, and it's not happenstance. That it's so when people say that, oh, it's just because it's all human nature and it happens in different places and it establishes itself in different places. So the Twa and Mbuti were the original people before there anybody else on this globe. The small people, small black people, were the first people on the earth. Period. That's documented. Science says that, right? Anywhere you go, you see those dynamics, right? And so that's where things get really hairy and people get really twisted up, because it's hard to talk of these origins if you are lost and don't have good understanding, or you don't study, because study is key to life. And I think it's very important to bring that to focus. When you study, it's not to downtrod or to look down on anyone. It's to see things as they are, and to see that we are united. There's only one human race, right? Period. Because of that, we understand that all points of origin have a source, and that source is clearly seen on the continent of Africa, what they call Africa today, right? And that's very important to realize that, because when we begin to start to, oh, I'm this and oh, I'm that, okay, but in reality, all sources of existence, all points of origin go back to one central place, right? And so people get twisted because they start to think of things in a very convoluted way, because history has been convoluted in so many different directions. Even if you go to the highest of the northern parts of the earth, you still find dark-skinned people. Okay? And that's very important to understand as well. So if there was only because of the physical features within a harsh snow environment, then there's parts of Africa that have that as well, that have snow, heavy snow. There's parts of Africa that are, like I said, that are full desert. There are parts of Africa that are very lush and green, right? And things are constantly shifting in each of those areas. And then you go back even further, all continents were one continent at one point. Okay? So that's the other side note. And so that's when we begin to not fall victim to a lot of the foolishness. Like a lot of people talk about flat earth. Foolish. The origin of all humanity spoke of the earth being round, right? We have to dispel all these lies and foolishness, because that's when we will actually be able to see things as they are. Because those same Twa Mbuti were scientists. They knew herbs. They knew how to maneuver and deal with things on a grander level, right? That's why we have things like Ifa. That's why we have derivatives of Ifa throughout the whole globe, because all of those things are rooted in the same people, in the same origin. You have certain kinds of um, specific, um, uh, you have certain kinds of specific um, knowledge bases. And so those specific knowledge bases all coming from one specific source, right? No matter how it looks, no matter how it flows. There's only certain kinds of societies, cat societies. There's only certain kinds of things that are truly in harmony with the things that we seek to accomplish, right? If you understand that, you understand all points of origin. All points of origin. There is no place on this earth that does not um, speak of this, period, right? So all forms of, so you have some kind of reptile or some kind of, reptile society, some kind of bird society, some kind of, um, so so when people traveled, they sought to see these things, and then they start to see other animals all throughout the continent, and then they start to see all these things all throughout the globe. And they said, okay, well, we're in a different environment now. So this environment we take and we pull from these different herbs and these different places. But there's certain herbs that are here in California that are also in Nigeria. There's certain herbs that are in Nigeria that are also in the Philippines. So why? Because that's the point of origin. All existence comes from that continent, right? So, even if you say Alkebulan or Africa, or those are still not words from that continent, right? Those are misappropriations of those words from that continent, because there was no Alfika, right? That is the Arabic word, right? So Alkebulan, nobody spoke or knew of that, because that was not, again, that wasn't the name, because there was no name. You had different peoples from different regions and different lineages that mixed and matched and created all existence, right? And then that's when things begin to open up and fully develop and grow into a greater sense. So please like, subscribe, follow. Um, now, those that are subscribing can actually comment. So all comments are only for subscribers only, right? So if you would like to comment, or you'd like to come up, you can come up and we can talk. But if you'd like to comment, then those are the things that we are rooted in first and foremost. So you like to ask questions specifically about the things that you've seen when I first started. So that was just an inquiry. That wasn't a full divination. And so you start looking at these things. You start saying, whoa, okay, these things are powerful. Bigba. That is another tool of Abigba, which is called Obalufon, which is the longest lived king from Ile Ife, right? And so to have understanding of Ile Ife, there's more than one Ife, because people spread out from there as a whole. That science proves that as well. So that's what we have to get away from, the colonized way of thinking, because they have polluted things and made things that, lighter is better, darker is worse, and da 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 da. But when you start looking at these things, you start to see all phenotypes from one source, right? And how people were interacting on a consistent basis. Look at the Igbo language. When you hear chi, it's an Igbo word, right? From West Africa. And you start to look at other aspects of language, right? You start to see how things maneuver in and around and around. But when you go to another place, when you begin to eat different foods, or you are in different environments, your language will change. And that's very important to understand. Very important. What's today? Today is the 15th? What's today's date? Is today the 15th? Thank you for the badges and things like that. Please come up and talk if you want to come up and talk. You're more than welcome to do so. Because this is what we seek to understand and connect to with many people is... Wait, what? Oh. Yeah, we seek to have these understandings with many people, because a lot of people have things really twisted up in who and what we are in this world. Because life in itself you have a dominant and you have a recessive gene, right? Because the point of origin always speaks of the dominant gene, which is itself. Um,
Aboru, aboye, aboshishe.
Ako ato asoria guru. How are you?
I'm doing good today. It looks like it's snowing outside, so I'm trying to see what this weather gonna do before I get out, if I'm gonna
Where,
get out.
where are you? Where you coming from?
I'm in Georgia.
Oh, you in Georgia? It's snowing out in Georgia, really? Whoa. Okay. Yo, oh, you must
Mm-hmm.
be in northern Georgia.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Today's the 16th, right? Isn't today the 16th?
it's the 16th. Yes.
Yep.
So
Did
how are
you?
y'all doing today? You on early today? You usually a midnight groover.
I know. Midnight or flowing into the other side of it, you know. So
Yeah.
that's what trying to get in a little bit otherwise. So commenting wise, what I'm seeking to have for folks is the subscribers are the only ones that can make a comment. And then
Mm-hmm.
everybody else can come in and do what they seek to do. Um, that is how we roll. Yeah, I'm trying to get on here a little earlier and a little bit more um, consistently, and in a time where people will be up. you know,
Mm-hmm.
because everybody's up at different times. Cynthia, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm over here just going through TikTok,
Oh,
working.
yep. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting
Yep.
about topics you talk about.
Yeah. And so, did you hear today's topic?
No,
Yeah,
I didn't.
Mink
I
said,
yeah, it's been one
yeah,
of those mornings, cold mornings, like she said. It's
yeah.
where at. It's been cold, and the power was out too. So try and
Oh.
get everything situated. But no, what was the topic about?
So all skin tones, all phenotypes, all points of origins come from what they call the continent of Africa. That's what we'll talk about today, specifically.
Oh, okay.
Because we just talk. I was just saying it specifically now that when we look at that, we start to see how every aspect of every when people say, well, people only became European or very fair skinned when they left the continent and went into these very cold climates. But that's a misnomer with science because you have places on the continent of Africa, what they call Africa today, that are that snow, and people don't realize that it is snows on the continent of Africa, right? There's the deserts, there's the tropical areas. There are many all the phenotypes, all the genomes, all those things are rooted in the place. The smallest people in the world, the tallest people in the world, the fattest people in the world, the skinniest people in the world, all in that on that continent. And so that puts things into a greater understanding that where those things that we speak of now are really convoluted in a more of a colonizer science because even then within those sciences we see itself that there are many different aspects. So even the type of we call Chinese, you can go to the San people in South Africa and see those phenotypes there of the skin tone, from my skin tone all the way to in Afin, and they call in Yoruba the the
Mm-hmm.
the
And it's important to say all of their magic is doesn't. Some people think that their magic is stronger than others just because of where they're from,
no,
and that's often not the case.
right, because all points of origin starts with the little people. So even you look at the Cheddar Man in the British Isles and the Norse. You have people that originally in the Norse plane that were very dark skinned to very light skinned to very fair skinned, right? And so that's really interesting to say because there. So with even in the places you call the Caucasus Mountains, where that word Caucasian comes from, there are people that
Hmm.
are dark skinned that are
And they
are.
just had a whole event for that this weekend.
Oh, really?
I seen it. The government was they was talking about the caucus. They was
Mhm.
at some event for it.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And so that's when we think of. who and what and origin that we have, because you have all forms and angles on the continent. So, like I said, Afin was a very fair, uh, you know, different aspects of Afin as well. There are the ones that are pale, very pale, and there's the ones that's slight pigmentation, and then it goes all the way down the road. And so those are important things to understand. And the reason why I'm bringing this up today as a topic, because that native brother that was on here, I like the way what he was speaking about when he gave the many aspects of many of origins of all people on Earth. But the only thing that I would say that was not so, that was I don't disrespect anybody's view and their way of seeking to explain things, because these are things that were passed down from person to person. But when you begin to see that, wait a minute, in the west coast of Africa, you have all forms, all these colors. In South Africa, you have all these colors. In all temperatures and arid zones and all those things, you have red people on on the continent. You have all aspects of people on the continent. Only through recent times, meaning within the last few hundred years, we dare say 1,000, but even not that long ago, that we have these. Oh, this person is white, or this person is such and such, and it's not. These are misnomers. These are foolish misnomers, because all existence comes from the continent of what they call Africa today. Because the word Africa is not a word that was used there on the continent, nor
Hmm.
was Alkebulan, nor was Egypt, nor was these words aren't from that place.
Right. It was Kemet.
And Ethiopian was not a word that was used as well. That's of a recent origin, you know. And so it's really important to understand these things, and that's why I speak about it today, because those things are important to bring to the forefront.
Did
Uh,
the Africans call Africa Yoruba?
Nope. Because again, there were no. So like when somebody says Nigeria, that's that's the colonizer's name. That was
Mm.
based off of um, not just the Niger River, but the literally the colonizers came up with that name of Nigeria, right? Just like they came up with Upper Volta, all these other names were falsified. These aren't the names of the people what they called it, because you had different regions of different peoples. So there was no there was no distinctive lines between Togo and Benin. There was no distinctive lines between the Congo and Cameroon, or between those places and uh, what they call Southern Africa. There were no countries like that, because there are people that intermixed and interchanged many different things, and they traded consistently on the continent. So just again, look at that word chi. That is the origin in the not in Asia, but in with the Igbo people on the continent of Africa, right? Um, you find that in a lot of their teachings and a lot of their pathways and the way that they speak of things, right? So because of what they call racism, but in reality, there is no other race other than the human race, which is we are the origin of all existence on in one area, and all the continents itself were one big conglomerate. They broke apart over time, but wasn't any distinctive places like Australia or um, South and North America, or any of those places until after these the landmass broke apart, right? And so that's really important to understand, because you start to look at science. If you just look at today's science, it tells you this. This is not conspiracy theory. This is not any of those other things. But if you start to look at and study consistently geology, if you start to consistently look at zoology, if you start to look at all of these places and in the sciences, it tells you directly what it is. Archaeology, paleontology, all these things are telling you this on a consistent basis, right? So when it said, even the first written word was not in Sumeria, right? Or Mesopotamia and all those other areas. No, it was not, because they see tablets specifically in not only West Africa but also in East Africa, right? And so I've been saying that we all come from Africa for a long time. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's a given. That's a given. All points of origin. All points of origin. And so that's where we get twisted up, and we can be manipulated easily if we begin to look at things from a very distinctive position, right? And I encounter these things on a regular basis when I get into certain environments, because it's really the notion of this someone being superior over another is foolish, because all points of origin come from one source, right? And again, that doesn't derail or disrespect any culture. So culture or nationality, as we speak of it today, that's just things that are, again, created by someone conquering a space, going in and saying this place is this place is this, because when they came in and they said that, America is America, or this is such and such, Espanola, or this is such and such, this is such and such. No, all points of origin. The conversation was beautiful. I'm like you, Baba, with open perspective, even if we don't agree. Exactly. So that's just it. If you don't agree with something, it doesn't mean you have to argue and scream. That's irrelevant, because all existence, from all aspects, in all angles, you can see it. Period. Right? When you begin to have a good dialogue, then you see how things have developed and grown in that area, and how things can actually be able to have a conversation about these things in a way that is harmonious. Tay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just after the live, um, Monroe hit me up and he was, kind of upset about the guy's conversation. And so I was helping him understand that, sometimes there's going to be times, especially with the positions that we're in, there are going to be times where people like that want to come in and they want to share their perspective. It's okay for us to listen and not agree, but not argue or not feel like we have to prove, certain points.
Because ultimately, what are you saying? Not to interrupt you, but ultimately, what are you saying is that we are all one people.
Right.
And so that's where I wasn't disagreeing with him, because I kept making these references to different aspects of what we were talking about, and that's why
Right.
it was so cool, because we um we were able to have that conversation. You see
Right.
what I'm saying?
And that was my thing. I thought it was that's why I said beautiful energy, because I felt like he wasn't forceful, he wasn't disrespectful, he wasn't rude with what he was saying, and he wholeheartedly, this is his culture, this is what he believes, and I
What he's
think
been taught.
anybody that, like you said, this has been passed down from generations for him. So I feel like anybody that can, openly share and I don't want to say secrets, but you get what I mean, the the lessons and the experiences of his culture, that was a beautiful thing, because he didn't owe us that,
Right.
and it
No, no.
made sense. And that's why I said it makes sense, because sometimes we feel like we don't it's like we can't understand certain people, and it's like, well, what is it with them that we're missing, or what is it that we don't quite understand about their culture? And I felt like his openness provided that missing link for me, because I'm not really one that like I don't really resonate with a lot of native cultures like that. So it was like, okay, I see why. You know what I'm saying? It was making it clear for me. Like I see why, that's not really something I've ever been interested in or drawn to, and that's because of their process, their beliefs, But
Well, yeah,
again, I don't
I
have to
think
argue with him. I don't have to tell him he's wrong. We don't have to go back and forth. I just know that that's what they believe, and that makes sense that that's their belief system based upon how they move forward, and that's how that is. What's up, Sophie?
and so I think that's so fire.
Girl.
And so the reason why I say that in the way that it is too is because he wasn't argumentative, and so even what he was saying wasn't necessarily wrong, but he put it in different places and spaces. Oh yeah, no problem, no problem. It wasn't. Uh, it wasn't a. It wasn't something that was out of sync at all. It actually was really poignant at that point because I was making the correlations between all these spaces and places, right? And how things were actually developing and growing, how these things were actually overlapping in a lot of ways, and the sciences and things that people were talking about, right? Because he was really speaking of the same thing that I was speaking of, but he said it in a different way to make it palatable for a lot of people, right? And that's why I respected it because we came in, we had a good conversation, we were able to talk, we were able to build. He was able to speak from the things that he learned as a youth, and all of these things, if you really listen, were completely in harmony. None of those things that he was speaking about his culture was disrespectful to the things that we spoke of when we spoke of Yoruba culture, right? Or any other culture on the continent. But I wanted to make this video because today, or go on this live today, to look at it from another perspective. Because when you look at the continent, you have every single genome. You have Reddit people. Yeah, so people that haven't traveled to the continent, it's hard for them to palate that. Like I remember working at this health food store, and he said, "Your name is Yoruba." Yep, it is. Babo Kwesamo Ifakure de Fadairo. Well, everybody in Nigeria is very dark skinned. No, that's not true. That's not true. There are many different skin tones that reside in Nigeria, from Afin to Dudu to dark, very dark skin, right? And so all of these things are specifically in that space, just in that space, not to mention in all parts of that continent. Because generally we think of it as a monolith, that is only one place, one thing, and one point of origin. And people look all the same. Because if you go to Burkina Faso, their origin is originally from the coast of Ghana. The coast of Ghana, not where they are now. The Bissa people, right? If you go to anywhere on the continent, you see these things shifting and shaping in all kind of ways. And I think that's why it is very important to understand these. That's why you have names, right? And that's why you have the names of like Fukiya Bonseki is actually from the Congo. There was a scholar from the Congo. That was his name, right? He was big, Kikongo. But you find the same name in where? In Japan. Same exact name, right? You have names like Edo, like Anu, like all these things that you'll find the same names all throughout the globe in different variations. And so linguistics, even when somebody says Baba, right? You can go pretty much when they say Ye Ye, or you can find these variations of that all throughout the globe, in one form or another, right? And again, Malu always puts it into perspective when you look at it from that perspective, and saying when you go to another place and you drink the water, you eat the food, you do the X, Y, Z, the language changes because you're in a different environment. So you can say that from anywhere, just on the continent itself. So when you see people saying, "Oh, I'm Spanish, I'm from Spain, Hispanic," okay, but Hispanic denotes that your point of origin is from there. right? Um, but clearly, like in the Dominican, like Dominica or Dominican Republic, right? You see people that are clearly of African descent, right? But because of the colonizers' mind state, that these things are put into perspective that the lighter the better, or the the affine, or the paler the better. But that concept is very new. It's very new in its origins. And I think that's where that's why I came on today to do these things. So fire. Uh,
Yeah.
so did you want to chime in on the topic today?
No, I need to get more of a feel for it properly first,
Oh, so
because
so
my brain hasn't kicked it. You know, my brain usually kicks into an idea. At the moment, it hasn't. Maybe because I'm being harassed by a dog and an 8-year-old.
well, so all skin tones, all phenotypes come from the continent of Africa. That's what I was saying, right? And so the reason why I say that is because you can find those from very, very pale to Afin or albino, all the way to very, very dark skin on the continent. Anywhere you go, from north, east, west, or south, or central, you see the same concepts. You see the same thing anywhere. So even when we talk about, because there was a brother that came on from, he was from a native tribe of here in the states. I mean, yeah, in the states, in South Dakota, from South Dakota, and he was speaking of the different origins of the peoples, and what they brought into the world. And so that's what I'm saying. He was. I enjoyed him saying that. I respect him for saying that, because there's so many things that people are misnomers when we speak of African people. Because the only true native of the earth is Africa, right? Neil deGrasse Tyson speaks of this. He spoke about this, because that is the point of origin of all existence. So all when they traveled outside of that continent, they traveled to all these other places and spaces, and they didn't change color when they got there. A lot of folks was already Afin, or different versions of Afin, of that mutation of a lighter skin, of a very pale skin, all the way to very dark skin. And you find also very dark people in those places of the Caucasus Mountains, of like I said, the British Isles with the Cheddar Man. He is the oldest known remains that were found there in the British Isles, and in Sweden, same phenotype, and in Asia. You have the same thing. So when I look at my
The
origins
man
of
might
my
be at Cheddar Gorge.
huh
I think the Cheddar Man might have been found at a place called Cheddar Gorge.
exactly.
And that's in Somerset, where the heart chakra of the world is, like Glastonbury is. That's the same county, which is weird that where they say is the heart chakra of the world, that this old, like
Well, because
what you want to call it, body person, yeah, found.
yeah, exactly, and
What?
it was a very dark skinned person. It wasn't That person was not light.
Which is, what do you think on the? There's many people now who are. So, do you think that people who are from, who say they are indigenously from other continents now, but what are phenotypes match African phenotypes? Do you
So
think
that's
that's possible? That's possible because each continent already had people that
hmm,
matched each one, or do you
because
think it all was African originally?
yep, because it all one point of origin, and they traveled outside of that space, right? Because the oldest phenotypes on Earth, the oldest origin. So, like, again, I go back to my grandfather, right? My grandfather was from the Philippines Islands, right? On my father's side, my grandfather was from there. Very dark skin, same kind of hair like I had, right? And so you look at that, and that tells you specifically, because that was the first wave that came out of the continent. And then you think about all of these continents that we have today were one continent at one point, and they separated, right? So when somebody says, "Oh, we were the first people on this continent," okay, well, we were the first person on this continent, okay, that makes sense. But because all of these continents were one, and then all of those spaces and places, when we traveled outside of the continent and went to these other places, establishing cultures and traditions and things from that environment that you're in. But it's not like that their skin tone changed because they went to that environment, because they were very dark skinned, very light skinned, very pale skinned before they left the continent. And you see that today. You see all points of origin: the tallest, the shortest, the fattest, the skinniest. Um, all points of origin are there. But because we have so many different aspects of what we call racism or ethnicities, but really we're talking about nationalities at this point, because the nationality that we think of and we talk of and we connect to, that is a kind of a real irrelevant notion, and it's being it's like a misnomer, because when you can start to separate things in that way, then you can start to do and say things that aren't necessarily true. Then you can start to break up all peoples in the world. Like, oh, they didn't become very pale skinned until they went up to the Caucasus Mountains. Not true. There were already people of that origin and that skin tone inside of the continent. So that's what basically we're talking about right now.
Awesome.
So I mean that's controversial in a lot of ways. I remember I had a conversation with somebody from India, and he was like, "Oh, because there's a group there that's on that island that are very dark skinned, right? And
Yeah.
not talking about those that are uh, what they call the untouchables, but it's the ones that are on this island that that most people could not go to for the longest time because they were uh, literally forced, because they were like, they wouldn't let them on there because they were basically trying to colonize them, or make them wear and do things like the other people on other parts of India. But if you look at those things, just like that, those are the same phenotype as those same Twa, or those same small people, right? In the Philippines, in Thailand, in anywhere you go in this globe, you find the same exact phenotype. Period. In Ireland, you can find it. In Scotland, you can find it, right? And so these things that are, but when you want to separate people in a certain kind of way, then you have to talk about this narrative in a certain kind of way, right? And then that's where things get convoluted. So that's primarily what I was wanting to speak on in this live, because people get really like, that's not true. There are people that started specifically and said, no, 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 no. Let's not go there. Because even in certain, so we talk about the Shamang people, right? You have very dark skinned Shamang people. You have very light skin and very, very pale skin too.
Where are they from?
Russia, what they call Russia.
Ah, okay.
You
I
know.
was thinking I've never heard of them.
Yep. And so even when people talk about Auschwitz and all those things like that in Germany, right? Oh, well, there were only Jews that were in that space. Nope, that's not true either.
That's not
Because
true.
there were black people that were in Germany for over 500 years, when we talk about those movements and things like that, that were there. So you had black people that were also in Auschwitz. You know, huh?
Everything that there wasn't just one type of person. It was
Mm,
people who didn't fit the mold.
exactly, exactly. And even that is like a a a foolish way of looking at things too, because they didn't, when you look at that space with Hitler, what did he do? He said that the original people are the most powerful, superior people are the people that look like this, but he didn't look like that.
That's but I saw a video before by Billy Carson, and he was saying that he thinks that Hitler went to, where all the countries have signed a treaty that no one's to go to, what's it called, Antarctica.
Hmm.
I reckon he did, and the people that are there look like and they made a deal with him. You wage war, say we're the leaders, say we're the original people, and then when you win, we'll come out. That's what Billy Carson's version of it is. But he didn't win, so they didn't come out, and now everyone signed a treaty that nobody goes to Antarctica, and they've got some wall thing, and you're not to fly over it or nothing, which I don't know how no one. Well, I know some people do, but the majority of people don't question how that's not weird.
Right. Right. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's important to really look at it from that perspective because we have so many things that are complete misnomers or lies. And we're not talking about conspiracy theories. That's where I want to get out of that mind state. We're talking about these are facts. You know, because when you go to the
Who's
continent,
allowed to
as
go there?
huh?
Yeah, it's factual. No one's allowed to go there.
Yeah, exactly. These are facts. And then also these are facts that when we look at these are places and spaces that you say, oh, they only became white when they came into a very cold environment. It was icy, it was cold. Wait a minute, you have those same environments on the continent of Africa. That's snow. Aboye.
She said, I've
Mhm.
been trying to get in here. It's kicked me. It's blocked me. I was catching it. Peace, everybody. How?
In pieces.
Yep. So I want to get on a little at a decent time, I guess like people say.
Right.
That people more people can come in and kind of come in and see what's going on. Uh Akbar to Asori Guru phone. Kai, how are you? Come on up. Brother, please come on up.
Oh, you have nothing on at this time. They usually see you on when it's like my morning time, so I've probably just done the school run and I get back. And yeah.
I know. I know. I was like, let me rearrange the ranges, you know. So
Are you trying to
so
trick us that you live like a normal person? You're trying to trick us that you've got a
yeah,
normal sleep pattern now?
and I do not. Right. And so what I did this morning too was I usually do an inquiry in the morning, right? And an inquiry called TTSC, with Abigba. And that's what I did. Can't right now, Bob. Okay, no problem. That's the other part. People at work here. But um, so I did that too, so that people can see what this is. This is not an opole. This is a different tool completely, right? Different versions of this tool. Um, because that's what we start to allow people to see things, understand things. Like again, when somebody says that they are Dominican, that is a nationality, not a ethnicity, right? When somebody says that they are Mexican, that is a nationality, not an ethnicity. When somebody says they are Chinese, because in China there are many, 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 many ethnic groups. There aren't just one ethnic group in China, right? You have Muslims that are in China. You have Buddhism that is in China. You have different things that are there, but different skin tones as well, from south to north to central to east to west. So I think that in itself, when we begin to see these things and how people move, a lot of this stuff becomes foolish. Go ahead. So fire.
Think it's just fun to add more to the divisions. So if you can create a construct called race, and then on top of the construct, you start to pull things in that are not actually race. They're cultural identity, a country, something like that. So like you get people who say, "Oh, he looks Mexican," but like you said, Mexican is a country. It's not a. It's there's loads of races in Mexico, and then on top of that, then people say, "Oh, they'll call
Hispanic.
themselves Hispanic as a race," and Hispanic again is a Spanish-speaking
Right. From
person.
Spain. So you
So
talk
then
about those
again, you
colonizing
so
that space.
subscribing to these races that are not actually even races so create more of a division. So even across like places like Mexico, there's like a division between people who look Mexican
Right.
whatever that's supposed to be, and people who don't, and if they don't, then they're seen as lower class, kind of, if they don't look, because then there must be some type of black, in which case they're
Right.
not Mexican. It's a weird
Right.
thing, but I've been watching a guy who does lives on here, who
Yeah, Robert,
speaks on it.
was it Roberto?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
he's good people. I like his
yeah,
live. I like his
yes,
live
yes.
because he puts that out in a certain way. But so I want to put this out there like this because again, I saw this thing with Neil uh, deGrasse Tyson, and he spoke of this. He's like, yeah, no, true indigenous people on the earth are Africans because that is the origin of all existence. That's the oldest remains that we found on the earth. Um, and you have every phenotype on that continent. Um, and I think it's really so. Even you find these archaeological digs that happen, back during apartheid, and they destroyed so many things to stop the origins of these places and spaces, and far older than what they wouldn't fit into their archaeological finds elsewhere, right? And so this is what we have to really debunk and not get into any kind of like conspiracy theory kind of thing. This is like this specifically is these are facts. These are things that can be shown that have been shown in all sciences, right? So it's not something that is convoluted and just like for Afrocentrist. This is for across the board. You can see it. It's not even like hidden. That's the cool piece about it. It's not hidden. It's not hidden. Black Opal, how are you? Abora Boye. You can unmute yourself. Hello? Synergy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so how do you chime in on the topic today?
Um, agree with variations.
Agree variations. What do you mean? How do you mean?
Agree that for a great length of time, all landmass was one mass,
Hmm.
and then the Great Divide happened. A bit of a variation as far as how the Khazar came to be, only because of what I've studied, and it's not to say it's right or wrong, just different. From what I've studied, the Khazar came to be out of a curse.
Okay.
Melanin was taken from their lineage as a curse.
Mhm.
That's what I was taught.
Okay.
So, yes, the original man was the hued man. That's where the word human comes from, hued man.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't believe in race.
Hmm.
I believe in species.
Right.
Um, I shouldn't say believe. I have the knowledge of.
Hmm.
So I agree to quite a bit, but then there's some variations as of what I've studied and folk around me have studied. So um, anyone with the L1N1 gene is
Hmm.
of the hued species. Anyone that is not of the L1N1 gene is of the non-hued species.
Okay.
So it
Uh,
doesn't matter shade.
but I asked this question too. Then, what of the affine of the albino and the variations of the albino on the continent itself?
Same. Some albino individuals have the L1N1 gene and some do not.
Hmm.
So it's literally scientific gene is where it comes down to. However, the less pigmented an individual is, they are less likely to have the L1N1 gene.
And from that perspective as well, um, because when you say that Africa is the point of origin, because it is, like you said, you can find those things. You can find every gene type, every phenotype on the continent itself.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's what makes it beautiful. Black Opal, excuse me, Senji. Black Opal, I just wanted to try to get everybody that came up. Black Opal, Abora Boye,
Alashiki.
how are you doing?
Um, I'm doing okay. I'll say that.
Good. I wanted to, so how do you chime in on the, how do you chime in on uh, the topic today?
As far as like genes and human genetics, stuff like that.
So the topic today specifically is all skin tones and phenotypes come from the continent of what they call Africa today.
I don't have no comment on that.
Okay.
No comment on that. I'll listen though, however.
It's because what I was saying earlier was that you can find every height, width, depth, or dimension on the continent, all the gene and the phenotypes on the continent of Africa as we know it today. Because at work, Africa was not the word that was used. Even Alkebulan, even Ethiopian, any of those things were even in existence. The name was Bible before flood or after flood event. It was all one continent. There was all the that's why you find different herbs and different things that are in one place or in another, because literally you have different terrains. So when people say that there was only one terrain in Africa, that it was only black Africa, nope. You had uh, people of my skin tone, people that were lighter, people that were darker, people that. So you look at the San people in the south, and in Central Africa, where you have people that are all kinds of um, different kinds of different aspects of how uh, uh, people look on the continent. And then you have people that traveled. Like I said, my grandfather is Aita, the can be said some of the original people on Earth, right? Because they came out of the continent and traveled to where they are now in the Philippines, right? Um, and if you look at their point of origin story itself, they speak of that themselves, right? Um, yeah, people made boats, exactly. And so, but there were people that are constantly moving and shaping and going in so many different angles. I'm trying to get you up here, Moreau, but I think that it won't let me because I'm at a maximum amount of people. Yep. So I am just a baby. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for asking.
Good, good. Boy, are you a part of the tradition? Have you dealt with Ifa before? Or you understand or know Ifa?
I am a part of the tradition of Bora Bora. Yeah, I should say. It's
Boy,
I
boy,
have. I'm the baby for a reason. That's all I have to say.
huh?
My name is I'm just the baby for a reason.
Well, I'm a Babalawo Alagbigba. I am a 10th generation herbalist. I don't like to say Isheshe because Isheshe is when people think of or say Isheshe, they
Mhm.
generally are mistaken for what that actually means. Because when
Mhm.
somebody says Isheshe specifically means the mother, the father, or
Mhm.
the father and mother, no matter what order you put it in, and the Ori Inu or uh, your your inner soul fate or path on this
Mhm.
earth, right? And so everybody on this planet or is
Mhm.
because they all have these things, right?
Okay.
Um, and so today the topic specifically is all skin tones, all phenotypes, all uh, come from the continent of. what they call Africa today, because there was no word Africa, there was no word um, Egypt, there was no word for any of these places. Those were made up words later. Ethiopian was not even a word that was used by people from the continent. Because there were different people from different regions, so there was no central name. So from the European perspective, they call it Ile-Ife, right, or Iliaye, right, and all Iliaye just means the earth, right. Um, so that's where when we look at the colonizer names. So even when we talk about Nigeria, there was um, no place called Nigeria,
Mm-hmm.
right. That is a colonizer name. There was no place called Burkina Faso. There was no place called, um, all of these names that were chopped up in the Geneva Convention, right? Oh,
Right.
yeah, you know what I'm saying. So just asking people how they chime in on that specifically, and then so we look at and see all those aspects of Afin in Yoruba. They call Afin or albino, all the way to my skin tone to many other skin tones that are there in West Africa. That's the misnomer that there only are dark skinned people in West Africa, and that's not true. There only are other aspects of people in different aspects of different parts of the continent. That's like saying that there's no snow on the continent of Africa. That's not true. There are mountain ranges where it does snow in South Africa as well as in East Africa. So, so I'm asking for the topic today is that how do you chime in on those things?
Well, personally, I believe that all phenotype does originate as what you would say Ile-Ife, because all of the land masses were connected together. It was just one. So all phenotypes, whether they're expressed or they're genetic, definitely originates because all humankind originate from that area.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And so that's when people even think about what they say Ile-Ife, they think of it as just being one
Like,
location because the Ile-Ife that we know today is like the seventh emanation. Oh, people say the third, but it's like really the seventh emanation of Ile-Ife as we know it today. Um, and so that's why I even talk about when we speak of Yoruba, people generally think of that as one dimensional too, because there are many different aspects of the Yoruba people. We can say the 16 kingdoms of Yoruba, and then the derivatives thereof. So many different kingdoms that connect to it. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Monroe, Abora Boye.
Aburu Oboye Boshishe Oko Atoi Wareful. Um, my personal belief, based on with like I see spirits, I communicate with spirits. So it's like based on my not just what I learned in various traditions, but like in my experience with clients, etc. So my personal belief is that instead of all of these convoluted theories, it's a lot easier to believe that once the Earth or this planet was created, the original human template was a darker, melanated person because of the sun.
What about the San people though, in South Africa?
That I'm not. You didn't let me finish yet. You didn't let me finish yet.
Good.
Just out of a logical, spiritual practicality,
Mhm.
it would be people who can not get dye off from sunburn and melanoma, etc. It's just when there was no architecture, where there was no clothes, where there's no textiles, there was no caves. It's just you're on the land. Let's say the people were created from the earth, and it wasn't just two of them,
Right.
and world was populated by insects. No, that doesn't work. We know it doesn't work, but the original people were just that. I mean, if you want to look at most of the texts, religious texts around the world, not just Abrahamic texts, but beyond, creation has diversity in it because there's different animals, there's different types of animals, there's different types of each type of animal, and in each species there's anthropomorphic difference between men and women and in all species mostly, and like that's kind of a standard. Now, where from my point of view and what I've seen, I've only a lot of other entities out there in the spiritual realm, they do have a more alabaster complexion output. And that, and let me finish. They have a little, well, you talking about, if you talk about like Aziza or fairies, or you talk about, or or you talk about, angels or other things. I've always seen them with a lighter skin complexion, and being descended from Black Europeans who came from Ireland, and yet still have these, like, I'm O negative. I have this rare European blood mutation that comes from like the Basque people. Like, there's certain things that only come from certain areas in certain parts of the world in certain populations, and those areas also tend to have a high prevalence of spiritual activity. Like green eyes only come from Middle East and Middle East Turkey area. That's where they said that gene originally comes from.
But
They
what
can
you
trace all green eyed people, that mutation, to a certain area of the
but you
world.
can see the
And in that certain area world, you have a certain species of spiritual entities that are prevalent there.
but in alignment with that though, but you still have people that were again when in Europe we'll say Afin or the albino, and they had the very
That's a mutation. I mean, there's people who are born blind. There's people who are born deaf. That doesn't mean it started from somewhere. It's a gene mutation. Like even blue eyes, you can have blue eyes with just the protein in your rods and cones not manifesting, and the default is blue. That I'm not saying one off or congenital birth defects as a proof of race. No,
that's the the
I don't think Europeans come from albinos. That's just because when albinos even even have children with other albinos, they don't have European looking children. They have African or Asian or Indian children who have complete phenotypes just bleach because their melanocytes are not working. They don't look European. Their skin color is just white.
yeah. But then what about those people that are in the Caucasus Mountains, right? Originally in the Caucasus Mountains. What
Actually, a
about
lot of people in the Caucasus Mountain region are not even, or can be very dark. And they look
exactly
Asian. They're not. They don't look European.
exactly
Anglo-Saxon European comes
exactly
from somewhere else. It does not
and
come
so
from the
that
Caucasus Mountains.
exactly because
That's
those
it's not present there.
yeah exactly and so that's my point of the topic today as well is because generally when people think of the continent they say well okay when people went to this other area when it was arid and it snowed in certain areas and so that's why their skin changed and that's why their skin is a certain way but there are those places that are on the continent of what they call Africa today that
I
also snow.
mean, when you look at the different remains that they find, like in the Denisovian, they have Neanderthal, they have various things like that. They clearly look like something bred with something else and came with some hybridization of something. It does not look like a modern human. It looks like something made it with something else.
Can you guys expand more on the negative traits? What does O negative mean? Because I have O negative blood.
O negative is a non-rhesus monkey factor, meaning that we are the O negative means you can be the ultimate, like the universal donor to anyone when you give blood because you don't have the antigen. Therefore, when you don't have the antigen, anybody can receive O is the universal blood type, so that means anybody can receive that blood. So there's two different things. There's actually more than just the five major blood types, but those are the general ones. But O is like supposed to be the oldest blood type, and then the rhesus factor is something separate, dealing with antigens. The problem is when, let's say, you're O negative female, and then you um, have a child with someone, a mate who is has the positive rhesus factor, and then the baby has a positive rhesus factor, and then sometimes and then it can cause problems. It can cause automatic miscarriage, or because the antigen is the womb is seeing the antigen as a foreign body and starts attacking it from a cellular level. So
And then
that's
there are dominant and recessive genes specifically, right? You see that in general.
Mhm.
Because you have dominant and recessive genes anytime. So, like in South Africa, for example, right? You will have uh, someone that has been um, very, maybe been down the line in a mix, or been raped, and other things have happened in certain kind of ways, right? And so
Mhm.
then you all of a sudden they have this black baby. Where's this black baby coming from? Because again, the dominant and recessive gene. So two black people can create
It's
uh,
always dominant.
white, yeah, can create a white baby. But two white people specifically in that same way, because sometimes they can create a black baby depending on
I
the
mean,
how
I
the gene.
mean, European Americans don't count because they're mixed with a whole bunch of stuff,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
even from Europe, like there, people just don't remember that they were taken over by the Moors, the Byzantine Empire, the Ottoman Empire, Genghis Khan, the Roman
Yep.
Empire, which was not all, phenotypically Anglo-Saxon. So they have a huge mixture, and then sometimes, yeah, it does come 4 or 5 generations down the line, or a lot of them were mixed with either indigenous people or black people or
Right.
Jewish
Is
people, or Sephardi Jewish people that are Turkish people that are all in the United States, or even from South India.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And so even those people that are in India, from what was that, Jakarta? I forget what they called them on that island, where they specifically were there before the so-called Aryan came into other parts, and so they were never conquered until
mm,
recent times. And so they are very dark skinned, just like again my grandfather and that same type of Aita people in the Philippines that were very dark skinned, and they weren't mixed in or out of certain things. So the reason why this topic came up too is because there was a brother who came up. Well, you were here that spoke of those things.
oh,
Uh,
I was gonna do several videos about that dude, but I calmed down
and so because of
because
that,
apparently I'm afraid of water.
exactly right, and that's that. So the reason why I didn't take him as being disrespectful, because he wasn't seeking to be disrespectful. He actually was seeking to
A lot of Native people are like that, but you have to understand that their tribal stories are based on um, what they can like. You know how even in Ifa there's a few Odu where you literally you look at it and you're like, I know somebody made this up. Like it just doesn't make any sense. Especially when you go into Sanskrit Ifa, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's like, wait, where did this come from? Of all, like, in the order is really weird. You're like, okay, so the earth was made, and then five major Odu later, they're talking about some really weird stuff that you don't want to say
so
on
even
TikTok.
when I opened up today, I did a TTSC, what they call in Abigba. So it was like an inquiry, right? So I threw Obalufon, which is just another version of Abigba tool. And so when we look at Irosum speaks of it being, she being a very light skinned black woman, right? And so so my point in saying a lot of these things is looking at it
Light
from the
does not mean
perspective of
bright.
right. No, no, no. She said very bright. So looked at as a very bright, light skinned woman. That's what it says.
It
And
say
so
that's not a light skinned baby, that's a white skinned baby. That's
no, no, you're right. No, but in this case, it's talking about light skin. So, uh, and then once you look at that, and he says, it's not good to engage with a white person, right? Because it will cause issues and things like that. But like arguing and fighting. But they're not talking about it in a sense of
Historically accurate
Mhm,
till this day in
mhm,
Nigeria. Yes.
yeah, because when you look at those things, it's it's very much so a they're not speaking about necessarily race. They're speaking about different skin tones that existed in those spaces and places and what people are engaging with and how they're disengaging and how they're connecting. But in this instance, it's not even speaking about it as being this is something different from someone else there
Different races
because it
just
was
talking about different changes, different tones within the same population. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Right. And so that's I think that's the most important part when we look at a lot of these systems. So that's why when the native brother came up, I enjoyed what he was saying because now it may have been uh the context of what he was saying that these came from different origins, different places, because you have yellow people on the continent of Africa, you have red people on the continent of Africa, you have dark skinned people in West Africa, and as well as very affine or light skinned people in West Africa. So that's where things get really twisted when you start, when things like that come into play. But from his what he was seeking to say was from that perspective that there are things that overlapped consistently, and that's why this information was so connected because
And it also depends on the tribe, and it's also a lot of tribal stories. A lot of people just run with it, but you have to look in the history and you got to look
right,
at where the tribe comes from. So
exactly,
sometimes when I start listening to the tribal stories, and literally sit on the floor with elders, with them sitting or like sitting down, they're like sit on the floor. I listen to the stories, da da da,
Mhm.
and it's a nice experience. But when you start thinking about there was this bundle carrier from Montana who she was actually from Canada though, but so she's in charge of holding like what's called like a thunder bundle. So it's very similar to somebody who like deals with, let's say somebody's in charge of, um, in Yoruba terms, like a penna who's in charge of holding the Edan, or somebody deals with Yamin is in charge of holding to ours. The Olo is in charge of what Odu is like that. That's similar type of thing where it's a sacred object and they're literally handed down. They're in charge of that sacred object until they pass away. So she was telling a story about the interconnection of people and also how scientists don't understand how far they traveled before the Europeans came, because she's like, in our Thunder Bundle, we have things that are from South America, we have things that are from Central America, we have, she's like, we have a skeleton of a bird that scientifically comes from South Carolina and it's now extinct. But
right,
we have that skeleton all the way up in Montana, Canada. So it shows that our people traveled all the way from Montana all the way down to through trade routes to the East Coast. And it made me think about how so many people. She was Blackfeet, by the way, and it's how many people from South Carolina, East Coast specifically, claim that they have Blackfoot or Blackfeet, and people say no, that's not right because they're from Canada and Montana. But she literally said that they've been there, but a lot of people don't know that. But but tribal stories. Sometimes you have people like his tribe. From the guy I was talking, his tribe was a raider type of plains tribe, so they moved all over the place. They didn't have a settled area, so of course their stories are going to change over time because they didn't actually come from an original place. They just always traveled. So you always got to take that. So because that's why some of the stereotypes came back. I was like, are we doing these Wild West
right,
stereotypes about Asians and black people? Like,
right. So that's why I wanted to come in and do that too, is um because I never want to come in and smash on somebody else's culture, right? But what I do want to say is that okay, so now that we heard him, what he said from the things that were passed down, right? That was given to him, and that's mainly what he was talking from. The thing that he received from this and received from that.
I guess a lot of those things what they said came from like early 1800 era,
Right.
And it's
Exactly.
kind of obvious because when he was talking about yellow and this and Asian people and black and this and they don't like water, I was like,
Yeah, that's not
that's
true.
from. I wrote in the chat. I was like, that's from generational trauma, not from nature.
Yeah, exactly.
That's from
Because
racism in the United States, not from
yeah, exactly,
natural.
exactly.
But
Because there are a lot of
it came off very Avatar, Last of the Airbender. I was just like,
yeah, yeah. And that, so I think that's so again, but I still don't disrespect what he's saying because as a whole, so the way that he was speaking was seeking to make a link between people, right?
mhm.
And so that's why that's how I took it specifically.
And I do like he was surprised. I did like the way he said he was like, wow, it's really like you guys keep this connection with the earth like from the old days. And I was just like, I was kind of taken aback. I was just like, that if a lot of you, I think I said in the comments, I was like, if a lot of tribal people knew that, they would be a little bit more respectful.
And so, but again, I think that because, like even like I said, I gave a story about when I was working at the health food store, and there were this. She came up to me and said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Babo Kwesan wo ifa kore de fada." That's a Yoruba name, and I was like, "Yeah, it is." But you're not Yoruba. I was like, well, I have ancestors that do come from the Awori people. So yes, there are connections to the Yoruba people. And so she's like, but I have a Nigerian in my household. I was like, have you seen Igbo people? Have you seen Ibibio people? Have you seen, there's so many people that are in Nigeria. So there's not just one phenotype. It's not just one very dark skin, a very light skin, a very da da da. You have
On Facebook, I see a lot of Yoruba, Oyo, and Ile Ife centric talk,
right.
especially when the Ifa space, and I'm just like,
No, no, it's true. It's very true, and that's why I always you hear me right, Monroe, because that's how I always say no. But so EFI is not just strictly centered in one specific location. You see that in all these different places.
and like when I tell people, oh, I got initiated in Ota, they're like, huh, where is that? I'm like, Ogun State, because they're
Yep.
like, I say Ogun, they're like Lagos, no,
No.
no, Lagos, no. I was in the bush.
Yep.
I was with all the witches and stuff,
Mhm.
unbeknownst to me,
Yeah.
but.
Yeah. Exactly. Otai. That's what people don't realize that was a
One
center.
of the main Iami spots, and that says in the Odu. There was three places, and Otai was one of them. And I was like, wow,
Yep.
I had no
In the
idea.
world, though. In the world. That's a cold piece right there, right?
Yeah, no wonder I got poisoned.
Yeah.
Uh,
And so that's where I think a lot of people get twisted up because they only encounter people that look like a certain way from certain areas, right? But if you go travel there, like when I was in Burkina Faso, there were over 350 different ethnic groups, and then subgroups of subgroups of those ethnic groups. But if you were to say Africa, okay, but there are many, many different kinds of ethnicities in one region.
right.
Um, and that's why I like that you come up because we can have this dialogue and we understand what each other are talking about, right? Because I know that there are Ewe people, that there's Igala people, there's Edo people, there's this or that, and so
I
we
got in I got in a couple arguments with people who like the Gala Day Festival. Like you saw, I have videos and pictures where I sponsored a festival there, and people have all these crazy things like Gala Day is this and Gala Day is this. And I'm like, it's a fertility cult,
right,
and in Arisha dealing with fertility, and that's from Ogun State. That's associated with the Ogun River. Just why we got to make it so hard?
exactly. No, seriously, seriously.
And they'll come up with
So
all these other theories, and I'm just like,
and
it's.
even when I talk about Ota
Or
or
they'll
the
say it's an
Awori,
EIME festival, and I'm like, not really, because Aboscom said that because he said that in the book. Everybody runs with it. And I'm like, that's not
Boston
true.
was a CIA agent.
What? What?
I said Boston was a CIA agent. That's what he.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And so that's I'm doing well. Thank you, Noel. How are you doing? And so when we even talk about a lot of these, like Karanga, when people talk about Karanga, and speaking about uh,
Oh my
and
God.
talking about Ifa, but he was never initiated into Ifa.
Like Pierre Berger, like they worship him like a saint in Brazil, and I'm like, I literally go to books and pages, especially about like Nana Oshamari, all of the stuff that come, and he literally went to Salve Benin. He went to, but he was never initiated. So when you read the stuff, he took what he learned from Candomblé and put it in the African part because he didn't have any research, and it's a very short section, and people think that's what they do in Africa. I'm like, no, this comes from Candomblé. It's not come from what they do
Right.
in Africa. I
Right.
have a couple photos, but he doesn't know what he's talking about, man. And
You're going out. I didn't. I can't hear you.
I said a lot of times he didn't know what he was talking about because he had no research notes. He just had a couple photos, and
Right.
he kind of fudged it. And people they respect the person so much after death that they don't want to say that anthropologist was wrong, but they were. They didn't
No,
have internet.
no, and plus that anthropology at that time was so convoluted, right? That what we know today is so much more insight than what we knew before. Even with the when we talk about the Sphinx is like 12,000 plus 12,000 years older than what it is, right? Um,
So I had to tell people, you guys got to stop this Eurocentric view of anthropologies and thinking that all like they have this like if it's published in the book then it's facts, and I'm like, you do understand that not all African and Black people around the world literally told every white anthropologist the truth. What happened?
You okay?
What happened?
daughter
It
was
fell down.
was
Hmm.
leaving out, so I was like, want to say goodbye before she left.
I was just like, what happened?
Yeah, my daughter was leaving, so I was like, I want to just say
Okay.
goodbye before she left.
What I said was like people have this view that everything in the anthropological book is correct, and I have to, and I'm like, you guys don't realize that people lie or people tell anthropologists wrong information on purpose,
Right.
especially when it comes to hoodoo, but definitely in Africa. Like people lie to us in Africa. Like they will tell us stuff and then wait for you to figure it out, and there was this younger dude who went to he went to Africa from Benin, trained on this person, and he went when he wrote about when he went to the Egungun Society in Benin. He was complaining how people were racist towards him, distrusting, and they told him straight up, "It's like you're gonna put secrets in the book." And I'm like, and he was like saying that that was being, discriminatory. And I'm like, you literally have this in a book, so didn't you do exactly what they said you were gonna do? You're literally telling about the structure of shrines and stuff like that in the book. So you did exactly what they claimed you were gonna do,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
you're calling them racist.
Right. And so that's just it too. That's why I tell people when you're dealing with an oral tradition like Ifa or any other the African traditions, all these things were oral traditions at first, right? But there were things that were written. There were things that were done in certain ways because that's what the signatures are. That's what the symbolism is. It's a language, right? So even the ground drawings is a language, right? Is a written language. Um, and so when we start to see those things and how people are talking about them, like for example, I was in art school when I was getting my undergrad, and so they were showing these things from Benin uh, City, and he said they're showing these medallions and such and such, such, and they were describing it wrong, right? And I was like, wait a minute, that's not what that is.
They claim it's Yoruba and it's not. Like,
Well, so it's a different kingdom because some of those kings went back
right,
to Ile-Ife and connected to
right.
it. They're connected in that way. But what I was saying was like they were like, oh well, this is how this is used. This is what da, 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 right? And so guess who they look to in the audience? I was like, well, I've been to that place that you're talking about. I've seen those things. I've dealt with those people in Benin City, in such and such, right? Um, and so the first person I looked to was Afrikaan. I was like, wait a minute. She's her age. She's talking about from South Africa, and the Afrikaans were squatters. they weren't from that area, right? Uh, and so why are you asking her just because she's supposedly African and she's not even from that area that you're talking about? So what are you talking?
Afrikaans.
Right. And so that
Afrikaners.
right. And so that's like that really egotistical way of thinking. That's why I
You
say,
always have
well,
to ask a German or Dutch or Portuguese,
right,
but not even Portuguese, is German and Dutch
right.
person for, and literally people are like, this German unit, like I heard, there was a video I saw on Instagram where the person was saying that it was an Egyptian person saying that Egyptians were not black or that the Egyptians today are more mixed with African blood than their ancestors were, and da 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 da. They're quoting German universities, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna trust the British and German university academia where they literally did studies trying to prove their own racial purity for centuries.
Exactly. Exactly. Uh and it's interesting in that way. No, that's not Hinduism. So in a lot of times when we look at their their points of origins, when we look at these things and we talk about these things. So I was talking to this anthropologist from India, and he kept saying, "No, we're different people." Okay, because I was talking about those people that are on that island, the very dark skinned people, and then I was talking about the Siddhi people, right? Because the Siddhi people are from East Africa. Within the 12th century, then they took it and they brought it down in certain areas, right? So it's really interesting in that way where people get twisted up in a lot of angles, um, because of looking toward these people who are the colonizers for understandings of history, of things that actually are talking about who and what these origins of these different places are.
Can you guys tell me if I'm wrong? Because I was always taught that Sri Lankans were like descendants of us. Is that true?
Actually, wait, okay, so I'm South Asian mixed, but there is enough of a difference that, let's say, well, it's just the truth. Like 2/3 of the world is lactose intolerant naturally. Eh,
Yes.
Only brown skinned people in the world who are lactose tolerant usually are Indian, South Asian people from India and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Just because they're darker skinned does not mean, and they also come in different skin tones too, all over India and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. So it's not just the people in the South are darker. No,
So,
um,
so even when you think about that, though, when you're talking about, just like I was talking about the Aita people,
no,
right?
Sri Lanka is different
No,
than
no, I
India.
understand that. I
So,
understand that. But
oh
so
no,
there,
it's the comment.
huh? I see. Yeah, I see the continent. I see the comment rather. Um, but even when you look at those things, they are still talking about from traveling to that place.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I
Um,
think they're probably closer to like Ethiopians and
right,
Eritreans and Sudanese people,
right.
and there are literally a group of people who within India they're part. Well, I mean, unfortunately, they're part of the untouchable class, but they are descendants directly from East Africans.
Yep.
I show a lot of Hindu stuff on my page on the recently in the last year because they practice in a very similar way that people do in Orisha, not just paints, pigments, rituals, containers, all types of things, but also in the Mami Wata cult and that comes out from
The white cult.
mostly from Ghana into Nigeria. Um, they started syncretizing Hindu divinities with the Mami Wata spirit. So when I went to Benin, like literally ocean, it's not Mami Wata, but my
And I think that's
godmother, my
beautiful.
godmother literally, when I went into her temple, it was all Hindu images and murals and statues, and also the person who gave me my certificate, his entire temple was sculptures of Shiva and Lakshmi and Durga and Krishna, and it's kind of mixed within the Manwata cult to the point where you can't separate it. So I tried to get like I initially was kind of eclectic back in my initial path, and I was interested in it. And I just kind of was scared of it because it hit me so hard. And then when I went back to Africa, they were like, "Hi again," basically. That because they even have like Sikh imagery. They have gurus from Sikhism in the Mami Wata call as well. So it's like, and I was a Sikh for a while. So it was kind of like full circle. The things I studied earlier, I ended up being reintroduced to it when I back to Africa. So yeah, there's a huge temple in Ghana.
Exactly. So that's when you start to see these things. Even there's a somebody was telling me that there's a form of it looks similar to what they what you call Ifa in India. Akbar Torah so the Guru form. Silent wisdom. And so it's interesting because those are the things when you start to look at how these things interact. So even when people talk about chi as being a Asian word, right? And you start to see that in Igbo. You start to see different words like I was talking about Fukiao Bonseki, him being a scholar but he was of Kikongo origins, right? Or a lot of the words that you
Yeah, like your Ori in Hinduism is called your Ishkadev. It's the main. It's the spirit in your head that most aligns with the avatar of the divine for you, and then your Koldev is the main avatar that your family is associated with that they worship. So you have two different ones. You have your one of your individual head and your personal representation of God, and then you have your families, and then you also have community where you live. Same way it is in Nigeria, where you can have a Babalawo who has his Ori is one Orisha, his family maybe let's say he's Ori Shango, and his family is a Batala family, and then he'll live in a community where they'll work with Oshun.
exactly, exactly. And so there's regional like we were talking about before, because when you say Aziza is not in. You won't see Aziza specifically in Oyo. You know, you won't see certain entities in certain areas. Um, it's not like they're all in one specific space. Um, because these are ancestors that we talk about, and I think that's when we think about um, all of these aspects of what we speak of Yoruba culture, of Benin culture. So they all these places I just mentioned right there have Ifa. All of them do. You see the signatures are the same. You see the how they're approaching it. When you look at Afa, you see those things specifically, right? Um, and I think that's where, like, there was this. What's his name that was on YouTube? I think his name was Dinah Samir, and he would go into all these places and spaces, and he would go to. Uh,
You're trying to trigger me with that one.
I know. But he was so the reason why I bring him up. Hold on. So the reason why I bring him up is because he was asking really foolish questions, right? When he was going into Benin Republic or Dahomey.
Yeah,
Um,
whether they're Hebrews and all that other stuff, but
yeah. And then he asked, "Is this the same E5 that you see in such and such?"
Baba, Baba, everything about him is a farce
Yeah, it's
because
fake.
he is an ex model from ATL, and everybody in the bars in the Rainbows district know him.
Oh,
So when he went on YouTube and when got married to a Nigerian woman, I was like, I'm done. I can't. I was like, I know that's a green card marriage because
and so that's the funny thing too, because you have people that put forth this persona. You know what I mean? And I think that's also when I see him spoke about certain things, and when he went to places, he was like that. He was being very disrespectful, and he was talking about certain things.
he was trying to build a conscious community.
Right.
Like, no, I mean, I'm not going to, sometimes I get tricked. I get, flagged when I say certain words, but yeah, he's definitely been around the block in the rainbow community. I'll put it
Right.
that way.
Right. exactly. So what's funny about that too is when we look at that, and so when he was in Dahomey, right, and they were doing this, he almost got hemmed up by the cat that was like, "Are you serious? Are you about to try to do a drone and look inside this shrine?" You know what I'm saying? That was funny.
He tried to look
So
inside
then
the
when he went to
shrine.
that equivalent of a Babalawo there,
Yeah,
and
Bokono.
yeah, Bokono. When he went there, and he said, "Oh, so what's the difference? Is this really fire?" Da, 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 da. And he kept saying, "No, it's the same. It's the same Ifa." And he was like, "Huh? No,
Oh,
I'm asking." Da, 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 da. And so
yeah, he was also working on that path with the root guy, and that path with the root guy was trying like he he just sent me a message like last month. Like he's always trying to do a come up too, and I'm like, dude, like that's not check your sources for like you deal with people.
exactly. And so
No,
that's
it's
my
cause, no, because some of the shrines are really big.
right.
So, in certain parts of Benin, so like the Legba shrine that I got initiated at, it was just a community shrine. So it wasn't a tourist attraction, but it was the size of the building. Like the build, there it was building was made around the shrine. It literally went to the ceiling. That's how big the shrines are.
Yep.
And a lot, and most like in the markets, you will find somewhere you'll find a Legba and a Aziza shrine somewhere. No, Loa are different, but yeah, so they can be really big. Their earthen. The thing that's different than Yoruba shrines is most of Vodun shrines are earthen work. So they're um, it's always clay and some animal parts and different things, and there may be a stone in there, but it's
Yeah.
usually
So I will say that there are places that I've been in Nigeria that are Yoruba that are earthen works as well, or
I,
shrine. Um,
I'm being vague sometimes.
uh,
I'm being vague because they're on a live, so I'm just
no,
like I'm
no, I
trying to
know,
use my words
I get
carefully.
no, I get you. But so that's because the people don't look at it as different kingdoms. That's my point too.
Oh
Because I
no,
know,
and obviously when the closer you get to the border, the more they start to cross over. But I've met like again when I was at OTA. When people saw my incisions from Benin, they were looking at me crazy. They're like, "What? What does
yeah,
this mean? How do I do this?" Da, da. And because in Nigeria, incisions are usually done for specific purposes or for clan. They're not always done for a strict initiation to a certain spirit. Like not to the level that it does in Vodun. Like they don't mark the whole body. They'll do incision here, here, here. Not the dude. You did not get cut from like your forehead all the way down to your feet. No.
no, well, I'm talking about Ekiti. In Ekiti, there are things that they do certain incisions and marks from the top of the head all the way down to the bottom of the feet. There are
All
things
right.
that.
Ikiti is more towards the west, towards the homie land, right?
Mhm. So it's
Okay.
not so
Okay.
it's
So there you go.
Ile-Ife though. Ile-Ife and Ekiti are interconnected in a lot of ways as well. You know what I mean? And so you see a lot of the same things in there. So even when we talk about Abigba, even the Ewe people, you can see aspects of the Ewe people in Oyo. You can see the different aspects of the
Because they
Ewe.
got pushed. Because they got pushed west.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, I got cut everywhere except for my waist. Like everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
So, that's why it was so funny because I was talking to a group of folks, and they was like, well, Ifa is this da 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 da. I was like, well, Oyo Babala, I mean, Ekiti Babalaos are just different, and people don't realize that how what they specifically do. But there's lineage to lineage. That's why I like to say that too,
just
because
because
there's so many
yeah,
different.
I remember that one time I was like, Bob Allows always supposed to do like good stuff, da da da, and your eyes froze up, and you're like, at KT Bob Allows are different.
They are, they are. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's like when somebody from the diaspora says, and I'm saying this because I remember, I know you understand this well, right? When somebody from the diaspora says that, well, Paulo's more powerful than Ifa. Well, that's, you have to first
You
understand
read
what.
you read my mind because there was this guy that was had a video from this Cuban. He was like, in this Odu, it says that um, Shango was practicing Palo and this and that. I said, what kind of BS is this? Like they just made up these Odu, and then like you're trying to be respectful, but it's like. How can another? I was like, the closest interaction they had to anything related to that would be um,
What the Basa in the Cameroon?
Cameroon.
Yep.
But then again, I keep trying to tell people most of the techniques that we use in Palo Mayombe are not actually Congo. They're from Voodoo. They're from
Exactly.
straight A-way Voodoo.
Exactly. You know, I'd say I'm interjecting right here because that's the thing that I was saying. I was like, you realize a lot of stuff that they say and a lot of things that they do and certain things are coming from. I was like, do you know what FA culture is? Do you know what they practice? You know how they practice these things or what they're doing? And people are looking at me like,
Putting them
FA.
sticks in, but there's literally like if you look at it like, and I don't ever get the shrine because it's not a nice. I would never tell any American to get the shrine,
Right.
but like Kanisi,
Uh-huh.
Kanisi is a shrine that literally is a calabash full of sticks
Right.
and metal and stuff in the center and put with clay and stuff and it's gnarly. Like it is a shrine that is you don't want to mess. It's basically just used straight for witchcraft, and it's notorious. Like that's all it's used for.
And then,
Um,
so looking at
but
these cultures, how they interact and interlink too, I think that's, and so even when we talk about like the borders, like you're saying before, like the borders between those spaces, because even when we talk about Ile Ife is not one Pacific uh space and time. It's Earth, right? And so when we talk about that, even when we talk about issue.
they do that in a lot of the diaspora. Like here, they will have like they'll talk about Rwanda. Rwanda is actually a place in Angola, but when they talk about the spirit talk, they're talking about a spiritual realm called that. Or they talk about Kalunga, it's the spiritual place called that, not the actual. Or they say they use Pimba, which is like clay, the Ephraim. There's a city in Mozambique called Pimba, but they're talking about the spiritual aspect of something, and it turns into another thing
True.
completely.
Yep. It's why, like when you hear people say salam, salama, right? And and it's like yeah, there's the aspects, different aspects of how these things interact. I
Yeah,
mean,
like in Palo, we say Assalamu alaikum alaikum salam, and it's like, and
yeah,
that's just like that's totally Arabic.
right, right, exactly. And
And
so
then yet they will see no interaction between Muslim or Arabic with Palo. Like they just totally divorced themselves from it. And I'm just like, you literally are saying Arabic every time you meet somebody.
right,
Not just Arabic, a chronic Islamic greeting,
exactly.
and but they'll go straight to some other stuff, and I'm just like,
It's
but there's Muslim influences in Hishavudu too. So
yeah. And so that's when you look at that, because why? Because they were people. Some of the people that they stole and brought to these places through the transatlantic slave trade were Muslims
there were.
on the continent. You see what I'm saying?
I mean,
And so,
even in the United States, there were people. They had several categories. I remember looking at the original Virginia Charter. They had Turks, they had Moors, and then they had some N word. It was like Muhammad or something. It was stand for people who believed in Muhammad. So they were
right,
like distinct people, but they were already here on over here, not as slaves, but they were under as free people because they had diplomatic stuff. So yeah, they were over here in the New World
yep,
since like the 1600s.
yep. And that's really where people get twisted up too. Because again, history, traveling, people interacted, people flowed from one place to the other, and that's what makes it potent.
which
because when you
was a
start,
port.
huh?
Zanzibar in Tanzania was a major port for thousands of years between
Right.
Chinese, Persians, Romans,
And then
all over.
look at Carthage, look at all these other places and spaces. So again, we're looking at so many places that when we talk about
And I
the
think Mozambique is Polynesian language.
huh?
It's either what is the island nation? It's no Madagascar. Madagascar.
Yep.
They speak their
Exactly.
official language was a originally Polynesian language.
Yep. And then the Polynesia, you think about that. Like when I was talking to that brother from the Maori, there's this study that somebody was talking about. It's called Zim Zim, not Zam Zam. But there was a when they were looking at the Dogon and the Maori people and the things that were interconnected in many different ways and how they were the origins and the words and the things like that. Um, it's really interesting in that way. And then when talking to that brother from that was Maori from New Zealand, so I know when somebody says um, mana in that culture, they're speaking of specifically, right? Like it's the same concept as uh, ori inu, right? And even when you look at the Tongan and the Butongan, right? They have the same exact drum, same exact rhythm, same exact um, way of making their clothes and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. You start to see these things, and then you start to say, "Wait a minute, these, huh?
Samoan too.
Yeah, exactly. Yep." And you start to see these things and how things are when people travel, when people move for whatever reason. Um, that's where people get convoluted and saying this thing is monolithic. Is one way of thinking or one way of being. Like when we talk about West Africa, all West Africans are very dark skinned. Nope, that's not true.
Or they have a certain hair texture. And I
Right.
actually have to say this. Like I hate the whole where somebody has quote Asian eyes or Asian features because I see we both have those type of eyes. And I see it so commonly everywhere I go. So I stopped thinking that is a quote unquote Asian feature because
Right.
I see
Because again, we
so
look
many
at the
dark
San
skinned
people.
people.
We look at the San people down in South Africa. We look at
I know a
some of
lot of
the
people in Benin that look like that. They have very
exactly.
high cheekbones, very small eyes,
Yep. In
and
Togo, you see that in Togo too.
hmm
Yep.
I met people from Niger
Yep.
that look like that.
Yep. And so that's where again when I say all phenotypes and stuff like that come from a specific origin because when that conversation came up, and I'm glad he did say that because now, um, when you begin to really study and talk to people from different regions, like I remember when I first came back from Burkina Faso, right? I was sitting there because people market days people be coming in from many different places and spaces, so I was sitting there talking to when I went to Laney College, junior college out here in Oakland, before I went into undergrad. And so there were some people from that were Wolof. There's some people that were from Cote d'Ivoire. Some people that were Yoruba. Some people that were from different places and spaces. And so I was like, oh, you're Wolof because they look distinctively different, right? Than the person that was Yoruba from the certain region, or somebody that was Bisa from a certain region in Burkina Faso, or from certain such. They look consistently different, but when it comes to the states, they're just African. And so that's the kind of thing that I was primarily talking to too, because you have so many different. When people say, "Oh, Europeans have that small, long noses," well, you can see that in other places too on the continent. And so that's
They'll tell
where
themselves, and they brainwash themselves into saying, "Oh, we have European features." No, you have African features.
right, exactly. Exactly. So that's mainly what I want to do this live for. So thank you, Monroe, for coming up because I wanted to. I was hoping you're gonna come through so that we could have this conversation because it will be more. a direct thing. So when when you travel and you see things
Guys
outside the
trying to
U.S.
invoke me.
No, because the conversation that we generally have, right? And so it's not like when we talk about Ifa as the origin of only being from Oyo or from Ile, people that only from the certain regions do Ifa. And that's it's just not it's not so. So but because there are so many different lineages, so many different kingdoms, so many different ways of approaching these things, that's why it's good to have these conversations, right? Um, that's why I like to build in a lot of ways with you and other people that come on the live in that way because it doesn't stop. Um, right? Really? I'm not getting your live. What do you mean?
Literally, I literally just randomly got on and saw you were on. I did not get a notification that you were on at all
I
today.
sent it to you. I sent it directly to you.
Oh, I didn't check my messages, but usually I would get like a notification from TikTok,
Yeah.
and I'm just haven't been getting them lately.
I don't get live notifications when Baba goes live, even
Really?
yeah,
Well, that's
even though I'm subscribed as well. It's like
yeah.
just
I
TikTok and just TikTok being TikTok and
Yeah, you're doing too much positivity. You,
man. I want to say this.
you need
I
to
really
have more. You need to throw in more conflicts about race and fluffy spirituality, so the algorithm can like you again.
uh
Do more polarizing conscious movement. Maybe talk about a news article or something. I don't know. That's how I went viral. Talking about some tunnels in New York. I had like over 300,000 views. I was just like, wow, you guys have more than my Beyonce video.
wow. Stop it! Stop it! Stop
video on Facebook, Monroe, from here, which was to do a little kid talking about the CERN and Mandela effect, and now it's almost 400,000 views since like I put it on the end of December. On my Facebook, my business page, I had like 900 and something followers, and now it's gone to 1.6 thousand. Because a video that's nothing, I didn't make commentary, it's nothing to do with my beliefs, it's not my content. I credited the person who posted it, but that person's been banned on TikTok now.
What's so interesting though? So my first time on that something went viral on TikTok was during the pandemic. Maybe it's a little after, but during that time period, during that pandemic, a little after, I think. And it was that video of talking about the tonic. And that tonic was like now it's like 105,000 people or whatever on there that's viewed it. And it's really interesting because a lot of times when you look at it, um, that because of people that were wanting to connect to that tonic. And so when I started to do things that were specifically talking about this, I wanted to really see how that conversation would open up in many different ways. So building with people that are coming in and talking from many different perspectives is really cool. So it wasn't about the likes and stuff like that for me. It's really trying to have these conversations, about herbs, about Ifa, about, the
I look at trends. I just do what I do, and some things get more. But like now, I it's kind of like I underutilize my trending because I kind of navigate amongst like several major markets. So like the Latin American, Brazilian market, the Indian market, and then like or the South Asian market, and then Spanish, Latin American market, and I just don't make videos for them. I just because I don't want to engage in all the drama because you start talking about different things in Santeria and Ifa and those stuff. It's like you get a whole bunch of people in the comments in Spanish and English going off on you. Da, 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 da. I'm like,
and I've gotten that. You know it.
yeah, yeah, and it's just like I just
I've
let it
gotten.
go. I'm like, I don't want to be well known in that way because it's tiring and the energy is like.
Well, you know what
You
the
don't
thing
want to
is,
get on that. You don't want to get on the app for days.
right, right. But you know what I do see too, that there are certain people that are consistent, and then people are sharing it and building and X, Y, and Z, and then that's really what it's about too. Is a lot of times it's saying talking about things that are so my topics aren't necessarily, yeah, there are a lot of energy vampires out there, but the topics aren't things that I'm not booty shaking, I'm not twerking, I'm not doing all the other stuff, I'm not matching, I'm not doing all the other stuff like that. People do what they do, and they're doing what they need to do for whatever reason. But I think, just to have these dialogues itself is was been very good in a greater way, you
So
know.
watch him doing a twerking video.
And it's interesting because I have to be very careful on who I add to. They may have one thing on there that's talking about similar things that I'm dealing with, maybe five and X, Y, and Z, and then they go back and then they have this other stuff on there, and it's like, okay, that's cool, but we have to be very careful in what we even.
Oh, like the person was like that. She said she has no problem sending down demons and stuff. She said, but she practices Ifa. Oh my god.
So it's interesting how things move and
I
groove.
look at people's Instagram and their TikTok because yeah, if you just scroll far enough, you be like, wait a minute, how are you a Bible out and you're working in Goetia and you're working in Palo and you're working with this stuff and
Or you're saying that you're getting Odu from a pendulum. That's the thing that always is interesting to me. You know what I'm saying? So I've seen somebody say that. Oh, I can get Odu from a pendulum. That's not what that is. You know what I mean? So we have to be very careful in how even we engage with people. You know what I mean? Because that is a distinctive system and how people use that, right? But that's not what they. If somebody's promoting that as Ifa, then that puts it into a different kind of context. You know. But I think that's why I like to have these dialogues, because when I do have them, I have, yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense. But I always like to have these dialogues because to get rid of the misnomers that people often come across. You know what I mean? Because it's very important to do that. When we do, right? Yep, yep, yep. You're right. Exactly. And so that's why I like to have these conversations. Even when somebody came up when they were coming from East Africa and they were trying to have this superiority thing that I'm from Ethiopia and we've never been colonized. Now you've been conquered. Don't let's not go down that road, because there is no hierarchy between folks in the continent. So that's where I know that story because I've engaged with people in that way too, right? So that's where it is that specifically things are they highlighted and they come out and they see certain things. So because there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of misnomers, a lot of the people that
that person had issues with for the following reasons: A, you're American; B, you're a man; three, you're have dreads; and C, whatever, A, B, C, D, all of them. It was like, and when you're talking about spirituality, it was like that has a lot of that has nothing to do with you, and you can't change it.
right, exactly. And that's where a lot of that stuff when we start
But
to.
the main two was because you're a black man from America. She had an issue with.
No doubt, no doubt. Because that's what she. Where are you from? Where are you from? And I was like, well, I've traveled, I've lived, I have family, I have this, da, da, da. But she could not get inside her whole state that. Well, how you gonna tell me about my country? I was like, well, the Romo. And so she said this. I was like, in any African tradition, that there are, when we talk about the devil is not a Christian, is a Christian deity. That's what I was saying. It's like, well, there's people in East Africa that have the horns on their head. No, no, no. They don't even say that that's the devil in East Africa, right? So,
The
it,
funny
it,
thing,
huh?
she was Muslim. She didn't practice her own indigenous culture. and she
Right.
kept going off. It's like, if what? Okay, you're from the country, right? But we're talking about spirituality, and you have no reference for spirituality outside of Abrahamic tradition. So, what
Exactly.
are you actually contributing? Because we're most of us are fairly cognizant of Abrahamic religions by now.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's where a lot of misnomers and we talking about the very bright skin to the very dark skin to the very you have like that's why when you can go to Somalia and you have somebody that's very dark skinned, you say that I'm not African, I'm not black, right? And so because that when somebody even some when we somebody says Habarigani, because that's a language, but that's a trader's language, that, you know and so it's not necessarily just like when somebody says Tagalog, when they're talking about the language of Tagalog. Tagalog is a trader's language. It's a mixture of a lot of different languages. It's not from indigenous people from the
Including
space.
Spanish, yeah.
Yeah, Spanish, Arabic, uh,
Hmm.
African languages that are into the Tagalog, and we have all this other stuff. So it's really interesting to see how
The
those things.
other videos I love are the Imazig that are on here saying, we were always this light skin. I was like, in the desert, really? In the really?
Nah, nah. And so that's the cool part about it. Because if you go to Yemen, there's folks that are chocolate. There's
I know
folks that are on different degrees of that as well. Huh?
ebony, like,
Eb-
oh, but then you have like models like Iman that says she doesn't feel black, she's not African, that she's just a chocolate covered European woman. What?
Exactly. So that's again, we're talking about playing up um to this European ideal to be accepted. So that's the difference between that and things that as they are, right? Because that's playing up to these things so that you're accepted, or playing up to these things so that you are not looked at as X, Y, and Z. Because anywhere you have that black white dynamic, you're going to have these things play out, and people talk about it in certain ways. In India, you have that same thing, right?
It talking about this yesterday. I actually have a hard time even going on a date with somebody that's extremely dark skinned, as dark as my dad, because they have so many colonized issues about
Right.
self esteem that literally it turns into every conversation. And I'm
Yes,
just, I don't got time to talk about this crap.
yes, yes. And I think that's a different kind of scope too. When we really start to look at that, there is a different conversation as a whole, right? Um, because like when we go to somebody says that they're Dominican, right? You have the same kind of context.
Just stop there. Just stop there. That's a countrywide delusional psychosis. Like it just stop. Just stop.
Yeah, you
That's
know
the
what
case.
I'm about
That
to say,
that
right?
that that people that is so. There's so many. They don't think they're black. They don't think a whole bunch of things. Somebody made a video and it said, "What if you?" Somebody made a video and said, they're trying to do these videos where they say, if you take all these people out of the country, what happened? Da da da. So somebody did a country. I did a video and said, if you threw all the DL men out the country, where would the Dominicans go? And
Right, right, right. So, and I think that's like when we are able to look at these things for what they are. So when people study, when they say that they're studying something, you're really cross-referencing and looking and studying and traveling and connecting to people. It's not just one angle to things.
the intersectional delusion. That's on fire.
For real, for real, for real. That's a whole other sputter, as they say. Definitely like, subscribe, follow, share, drop some coin, drop some love. If you like what you're hearing, definitely uh, put out there my Cash App. Definitely Cash App me if you like what you hear.
Cash it out.
It's OPESANWO.
I'll actually add your number to my WhatsApp today.
Huh?
That's my one errand. I need to finally add your number to my WhatsApp.
I know, so we can communicate through there. Cause I have a
Because
I gave you my number, didn't I?
everybody else.
That's a cold shot. But and so if you know, I would if I could, Baba. You know that. Yeah. No doubt. But so and then, yep, yeah, definitely. And I want people to start to call, you know, and to build and to connect to WhatsApp and to YouTube and all the other stuff too, because I do have other places that I want to also develop and ideas and videos and other things that I want to connect to with people. Because the topic today is all colors, all skin tones, all phenotypes are you can find on the continent of Africa, right? And amongst, yeah, I have a YouTube. It's called Essential OB Trade. So the letter E, Central, CENTRAL, OBI Trade, TRADE. That is the YouTube channel, and that's where I primarily go in and I'm probably gonna start doing lives on there as well. I want to start doing that a little bit more. So those that have subscribed, I really appreciate you for coming in, because and I'm doing comments specifically for those that are subscribing because it's going to incrementally get into the thing where I'm doing live specifically for first for people that are subscribers and then for people who are not subscribers. And so it's coming up to that pretty soon. But I want to make sure that everybody is in and able to communicate properly. And
I sent you a tip.
huh? Oh, thank you, sir. Yep, that's me. That's me. Essential OB Trade. That's my YouTube. Exactly. Yep. Because it is so much. Because I like when people come in and talk about from different angles and different ways of connecting. Because when we do that, we are actually able to have a dialogue, and it knocks out a lot of misnomers. Even when we talk about the Yoruba tradition. Okay, I'll go subscribe there. Yeah, please do. Please do. Um, because it's so important to look at that. So important to see what that means and how that functions. And thank you, Moreau. Uh, because when we do that, we start to see different things that aren't so far apart, and that are a different lineage, a different angle, right? So we have to see where they intersect and where they don't, because people travel and people are connected in many different ways. And so we have to be very careful in how we allow people to come in and to abuse certain things that it is only one lineage or one way or one, because many people, I hate to say it like this, but in the diaspora, yeah, so many people from one the diaspora only think of things as one dimensional, as Yoruba people as one dimensional, when it's not that at all. And so I want to make sure that's why we have these dialogues with people, so that they can really fully see what this means. So even when somebody says dreads, we call this dada, because this is what I was born with. Literally, you can see in my hair how it curls up into this form. That's how it was when I was young. And so I've been on here for a little bit now, and I'm probably gonna get off right now, because it's been a few hours, and I gotta get to work. I gotta get to work. I
How
gotta get.
dare you have a life? It's
Ah,
all right.
who are you?
That
I
meme I
will
sent you
ask
still
you.
makes me laugh. Your baba can't be your zaddy. When I saw it on Facebook, I was creasing.
Oh my god! Oh my god! So, so
Sometimes I
that
love the internet.
oh yeah, for certain. And I appreciate people coming in from different parts of the world too. So because we can't have these dialogues, we can't have these things, we can't have these conversations in many different ways. And this is what I try to use these platforms and forums for. Um, and so I really appreciate when people come in and have these conversations. You know, because I had a conversation with folks from Germany and from Russia. There are black people there that's been there for over 500 plus years. You know, have been had religious positions and cults being held by Euro Brazilians. That's a whole other live, and so you about to take me down a rabbit hole, and I'm trying to get off here. Um, but we will definitely that's one that I would say we could go down that road specifically, in a lot of ways, maybe for one of the lives that's coming up, because I want people that are our subscribers to suggest certain things that they want, topics that we want to build on, and mostly for networking and connecting to people for different angles and different things and different pathways. So if somebody wants to know more about Ifa Bigba or different other things, like traditions from like Afa, like other things that aren't you know that people are coming in from many different places and spaces, that there's a place to network. A workout, yeah, exactly. Oh man, exactly. That would be for real, because there's so many Iha Wega, exactly. That there's so much information that is not really known by a lot of people. They only look at it from one dimensional aspects, but when you really start to talk to people and travel, you see a lot more. And then there's a lot more traditions that even engaging in developing relationships with, that you may not even realize that are there. Yep, sign symbols, but yep, exactly. Um, so thank you for coming in, because you could have been
You
so
boy. Baba. Don't make me start calling you Zaddy. No, thank you. No, thank you very much, as always.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming in. Thank you for being here, because you could have been in a lot of different places, but you chose to be here with me. So I appreciate you definitely. Thank you,
Always a
Todd.
pleasure.
Yep, always a pleasure to build with people. Thank you for thank you for your energy and positivity as well. Thank you for all those that chimed in, that came up, that talked. Thank you for building with me. Um, and please subscribe so that we can even get more input and more angles. I'm gonna try to keep it. Oh yeah. Thank you, make me believe in Ifi community game. For real, for real. And I think that in itself speaks about a lot of things where people get caught up in arguing, and I'm never going to argue with anybody on here. If people seek to argue, they will get kicked off, and excommunicado, because we're not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. And I think that's where things become really beautiful. Then make Ifi great again. Hey, SU is not Satan. Facts. He is a facts. Um, and let's definitely please come in, and if you DM me, and so we can have those other dialogues as well. Because I would love to build with people. Anybody having conversations or wanting to have seeking a big by divination, please feel free to do that as well. Thank you, Black Opal. I am about to get out of here because I need to do work. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I will talk to you soon. Probably be on here later tonight. I'm trying to get in on a morning times too. Odabo. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. You're working. Thank you.